Reading this book was so interesting. It was very daunting when I first picked it up because I haven't read something this big in a while, but I truly understand the perks of having such a big book because you can get to know everyone in so much detail. You can have this very intricate storyline and you can have so much to reflect on. So I will recommend this to anyone who honestly is also interested in just human psychology and relationships and just how complex we are and sometimes how unnecessarily complex we are as humans, because even for me, I feel like there are so many ideas in my mind all the time. And maybe reading a book like this and seeing that people in 19th century Russia were not that different from you in terms of how they suffered as well from things like overthinking can be comforting, and it can be a form of self-reflection as well. The thing I loved most about Anna Karenina was how interesting the characters are. I thought about the entire character arc of all the main characters that play a role in the plot and wrote down things about their personality that stood out and the types of ideas that they represent in the book just based off of where they start and how they develop throughout the story. The first character that I'll have to speak about is obviously going to be Anna Karenina herself. Through the book and Anna's role in it, we see the rise and fall of a very intelligent and stubborn young woman. She meets another character, Vronsky, by chance and is at first hesitant to have this extramarital affair, but does give in to the idea of the whole thing and eventually gets into a proper relationship with Vronsky. As a little bit of time passes, she is this person with a lot of self-respect. She's stubborn and she's not used to living a lie. She, in the beginning of the book, is very much in her truth, and that is what she operates out of, which is why she does succumb to all the pressure and guilt of what she is doing, and she eventually goes to her husband herself and confesses that she has this other man in her life and she loves him and that she hates her current husband. Her husband is a whole other interesting and sort of weird character, and his response is, well, don't tell anyone, just keep everything the way it is. And he's sort of dismissive of it because it seems like he doesn't know what to do. She, due to this, is lying to everyone in society for a bit in the beginning, which is when her character really starts to change for me. I think the fact that she gets into this relationship makes everything 1,000 times more complex in her life, and she turns into this woman who finds it extremely natural to lie, which was honestly the opposite of the kind of person she started off as in the book. Ultimately, one thing leads to another. She leaves her children. Her husband also doesn't get a divorce but begins living with Vronsky, and they move abroad for a while. During this time abroad, what I found very interesting about Anna is that whatever Vronsky would devote his time to, be it painting or architecture, she would get books on them. She would read everything and she would just begin helping him in terms of being sort of like this person who has consumed all knowledge there is in most books about these different topics, and she becomes like an encyclopedia, which once again shows how intelligent she is. Also, from an emotional point of view, it shows that she's trying to devote herself similarly, like Vronsky, to whatever she can devote herself into, because it is a very taxing thing that she goes through living with Vronsky, but worrying about her children and worrying about getting a divorce. Even though Vronsky's interest in these different pursuits like art and painting and architecture is a little fleeting, to be honest, because it is very evident that he is just looking for things to attach himself to, and he's looking for activities that he can use to add to his identity. Anna never points this out, even though people around them do. Because, for example, there is a painter named Mihailov, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who Anna and Vronsky meet. And this painter is very quick to analyze what Vronsky is doing and understand that yes, Anna and Vronsky are patrons of the arts, but Vronsky's interest and passion in creating paintings is fleeting and it doesn't have the same gravity that the painter has seen others have. When we reach 3/4 of the book, Anna's downfall becomes extremely extremely apparent, or at least it did become extremely apparent to me at that time, because she became obsessed with looking attractive to Vronsky. What essentially happened is that she was forced to live in the type of situation with the man she loved where there was no legal or binding tie between them, such as marriage. The only assurance that she did have was his word that he loved her, but she started to become extremely paranoid about him cheating on her and not finding her attractive anymore, going out and just finding love elsewhere and lying to her about almost everything else. As a reader and as someone who sort of has a bird's eye view of everything that's going on, it's very much evident that Anna begins to spiral. She is not the same elegant, beautiful, and headstrong, independent woman that she started off as. Anna begins to fundamentally live a life of false appearances, because even though everyone around her eventually can tell that she has turned into this extremely unhappy woman, whenever someone does try to enter into a conversation about it with her, she looks down, or she does whatever she needs to do to essentially avoid the conversation. This, like I said, is extremely different from how she started off. It's very different from the woman that Vronsky first fell in love with, and her being paranoid, her being extremely distrustful of Vronsky and always suspecting that he is lying to her or that he doesn't love her doesn't help her case at all. It ends up in her acting out of desperation, doing everything to be physically attractive to Vronsky while constantly complaining that he doesn't spend time with her or that he probably doesn't love her, which ultimately results in Vronsky acting extremely cold towards Anna, because even though that love is still there between them, there are some grudges that they hold against each other. Towards the end, Anna finds this young English girl who she sort of takes under her wing. It is an indication by Vronsky himself as well, who tells her during an argument that the only reason she is devoting her time to educating this young girl is because she wants something to do and she's running away from the fact that she's unhappy and has to sort of come face to face with herself and figure out what's wrong. What I found very interesting in the book was that Anna is described to have this recurring dream where she is caught underneath some sort of metal, and there is an extremely ugly worker who's banging away at the metal with some sort of a hammer right on top of her, and she has this recurring dream, and then it ultimately ends as she is just underneath this metal and this man who is hitting away at the metal. Now this is relevant because Anna dies at a train station, and this is the last thing that she ever sees. Anna's death is extremely interesting to me because towards the end of her life, she became this very vengeful person who wanted to have Vronsky be in this state of eternal love for her, but in the form of grief. Because in her mind, what she ended up thinking was, once I die, that will be my ultimate victory over Vronsky, because he would have lost me and he will feel like he should have treated me better. He will essentially lose the battle against Anna, because the message that her death will send to him is, this is what your being harsh to me has led up to. What's interesting is that she wanted to amplify the love that Vronsky had in his heart for her and bring it to the surface by dying, but she didn't care to be there to actually receive that love, which I honestly think just goes to show how twisted of a person this whole ordeal made her. Another very interesting thing about Anna was the fact that she actually had a baby girl with Vronsky, but it was extremely evident to anyone who knew her or met her that she did not love this child the way she loved her first son, who she had with her previous husband. I think that is an aspect of her character that can be analyzed more. I feel like she does not value this child as much as she does her first son. She feels a very heavy loss inside her because she had to give up her son for Vronsky, which is why all her attention and a lot of energy goes into just the amount of sorrow that she feels. Her lack of love for the girl may also be because her and Vronsky were not married. She was still very much throughout the book in this state where she had most of her attention towards Vronsky, and I think because of that there wasn't a lot of importance given to the child. Tolstoy did a really great job at describing the momentary flipping between emotions that humans go through sometimes, because Anna's death was a very chaotic, even reading experience, because Tolstoy was able to create this sense of urgency and this sense of unhappiness and this sense of confidence in an idea of death. But as soon as Anna has thrown herself where a train can hit her and where she can die, she suddenly does not know why she did it, and she tries to get up, tries to get back to safety, but she isn't able to, and that is when she ultimately dies under the metal that the old ugly man from her dream is banging away at. Even though those are my ideas right now, I feel like it can definitely be thought about more, but I will move on to talking about Vronsky's character. I think Vronsky was also very interesting, and he had a similar arc to Anna, because throughout the book I could also make out this sort of up and down motion where we saw this very strong young man and the book ultimately ends in his downfall. We see a man who has so much love to give, and he puts love on a pedestal when he first meets Anna. He has to, in a sense, choose between his ambition and pursuing his career and living with Anna and going away with her and creating a life with her. He also struggles throughout the book to find a balance between devoting himself to Anna while also keeping in touch with other manly pursuits and maintaining his independence, so to say. As the book progresses, Vronsky is pushed further and further away from Anna, as she knows that she is in love and she is in a relationship with Vronsky, but it's not on paper, and she is extremely insecure about the relationship, which is why it is never a peaceful one, and this results in Vronsky finding it very difficult to be in the relationship. What I find interesting is that in the beginning of the book, when Vronsky first approached Anna and declared that he loves her, his exact words were, "I see a chance of despair, of wretchedness, or I see a chance of bliss." What bliss? Which is very interesting, because even before the relationship starts, the author, through Vronsky, creates the idea that, look, it could go one of two ways and these characters could take a leap of faith, but nothing is guaranteed. It is very interesting to see Vronsky's attitude towards the relationship, because as a man, he also has his unique take on it. He is able to tell when Anna changes, because she doesn't have the same moral compass. And in the beginning, when she was having Vronsky's child, nor did she have the same youthful look or beauty that she had earlier. And obviously she regains this towards the end, as she's also making it a point to appear extremely attractive to him. But his take on the entire thing is that there was a stage in their relationship where there was a lot of passion, but they are past that stage. He feels that in that state of passion, even though his love was at an all-time high, that was the time where it was still understandable for Vronsky to leave the relationship. But now that that has been crossed and they have a more long-term relationship and the height of their love has fallen down, due to the way the nature of the relationship has changed, he cannot take a step back. This thought is very interesting. I think it's also very sad, obviously from Anna's perspective. It goes to show how this does happen in a lot of different relationships, and as you spend more and more time in one, you are committed and it just gets harder and harder to leave it, even though the dynamic and the love between the two people might decrease and change. Vronsky also wanted to maintain his own masculine independence, and he, from my understanding, wanted to be his own person amidst all the tumultuous things that were going on around him in terms of his relationship with Anna and her telling her husband that she is in a relationship with Vronsky and them having a child and them being sort of unacceptable in society. Vronsky's fascination with different pursuits like painting and architecture are basically a manifestation of the same idea of looking for identity and wanting to be his own person. What's interesting is that while Vronsky took up these different activities to explore what interested him and to still be pursuing a career, even though he gave up his previous one to be with Anna. Anna sort of clings on to him by reading the same things and by trying to help him in whatever way she can, by giving him knowledge about the different activities that he's pursuing. And obviously, from her point of view, this is a very considerate thing and it shows a lot of love from her side, but it also shows a lack of emotional understanding to a certain degree, because maybe she cannot tell that he needs to have his own identity and he needs to be strong in the sense of himself to fully also be present in the relationship with her. Vronsky does not explicitly mention that he appreciates or notices Anna doing this, which overall I think is also an interesting study in the type of complications that enter relationships. As Anna becomes more desperate and tries to use charm and surface level ideas like physical attraction to draw Vronsky out of this attitude of coldness or hostility, he sees right through her and he hates the fact that she is moving with a sense of desperation instead of the initial sense of elegance and confidence that he loved her for. Throughout the book, Vronsky is described to have extremely white and strong looking teeth and jaws, which is very symbolic because ultimately when Anna commits suicide and dies, Vronsky is seen later to be suffering from a toothache, which is surprising because the one thing that everyone noticed and what Tolstoy would repeatedly point out was Vronsky's strong jaw. So ultimately, I think this is a big symbol of the fact that Anna's death leaves Vronsky a broken man. Overall, I think Anna and Vronsky's relationship turned out to be extremely tragic, but the best part about it was how real it is, because the amount of depth with which Tolstoy wrote about these two characters and their feelings and their selfish as well as loving actions, thoughts and ideas, I think there is just no other writer who has done such a great job of showing human complexity and showing how the dynamic between people changes and how different circumstances affect relationships. I think that is what's most beautiful about the book overall, as well as their relationship. Next, I want to talk about Kitty. I think she was a very interesting character, but at the same time, Tolstoy did not explore her as much as he could have. She was not a character that was very fleshed out, but at the same time, she did have an important role to play. What I found interesting about her character was that when Kitty and Levin were about to get married, there were a few pages that Tolstoy devoted to talking about how Kitty as a woman was experiencing very different emotions to Levin as a man, even though both of them were going through the same act of getting married. The book touched upon how, as a woman, especially I'm sure in 19th century Russia, your life is ultimately supposed to lead up to this moment and it's the most important aspect of your existence, and getting married is like every woman and every girl's dream. And because of this, Kitty really feels the gravity of getting married, and she has this aura around her and this glint in her eye as she is fully living out this experience that is so important to her and that has always been spoken about with so much gusto and enthusiasm around her and given so much importance even by her parents, by people around her, because as a woman she knows that she is now forever going to be attached to this man. She is going to be fully dependent on him. This idea, even though it was really interesting to read it, I feel like there's so much more that could have been explored. All that Tolstoy said about it was that Kitty was fully embodying that experience of really letting the gravity and the greatness of it all wash over her. But I think exploring her ideas in depth about marriage would have been very interesting to read. Next is Levin. I found Levin so interesting. I think he is the character that I could relate to the most in the book, which is very interesting because I would have never expected to relate to Levin. He might just be the character whose ideas and thoughts are explored the most. He thinks about everything from his existence to the existence of God, to religion, to why people switch from French to Russian, and why mothers force their children to learn French and how he finds it peculiar. Throughout the book, he is dissecting all these different people's personalities while also getting his own personality dissected by Tolstoy. So I found reading about Levin extremely interesting. I think Levin's exploration of agriculture and his ideas on the role of the peasant in agricultural productivity was so interesting to read, because I am not someone who has ever thought that much about agriculture, but just having this lens to sort of see what conversations used to be like and what innovative ideas in agriculture used to be like in the 19th century, in Russia specifically, was very unique to read about. Levin also lost his brother, which was a very important experience for his character development. He had a very scared reaction to his brother's death because he had never considered it as something that could be this up close to him. Once he was in a room with this man who was his brother, who he loved, slipping away from life right in front of him, that is when the gravity of death really hit him. He reacted to it by being extremely uncomfortable and shocked and scared. I specifically like one thought that Levin had during this time. I want to do something, but I had forgotten it must all end. I had forgotten death. I think so many of us make that mistake. We get so caught up in the rat race and we get so caught up in the future and creating a career and all the drama and chaos that is surrounding us that we ultimately don't treasure everything that's happening, because we are not living constantly with this consciousness of, oh, it's all going to end. And I do think that it's not possible to constantly take every decision and every single movement that you make in life with the constant thought at the back of your mind that, oh, I'm going to die. I don't think that's the way to live life. But at the same time, visiting this idea probably had a great impact on Levin and can also possibly have a very positive impact on people in general, because it does make life more valuable. It is this exercise in understanding that you aren't immortal and you are going to die, which could also be a negative thing. It depends on how you want to see it. But honestly, if death is inevitable, might as well see that as a positive thing. That's just my take on it. Levin also had to deal with politics. His thoughts on the entire process was just about how convoluted politics was and how it was boring and how it was of no consequence to a lot of the people who would treat it as such a grave matter and would give it so much importance. It was very interesting to see from his point of view how some people, Vronsky specifically, actually took a very great interest in the tiniest of details in politics and also very enthusiastically and eagerly tried to establish a position for them in the political world. And this is something that gave them a lot of happiness and, probably made them feel important. But in Levin's eyes, it wasn't at all of any consequence and it didn't make any sense to him. I think this was an interesting point of view. Even today, I feel like people give a lot of importance to politics and it should be given a lot of importance. But I'm sure a lot of us are guilty of just hearing about all these different things that are happening in the world and just feeling like, okay, politics is kind of boring and it's complex and I don't understand it. So I think that part of me could really relate to Levin's view on the entire thing that was taking place. Towards the end of the book, for a bit, Levin is trapped in this existential crisis of sorts. He was just married and he just had a child, and all of these very big changes in his life are taking place. He begins to really contemplate what his position on religion is, because at that time in 19th century Russia, Christianity was obviously a very big deal. Being Christian, marrying and taking your vows, it all has a very strong connection to religion and to God. As someone who was in a very vague position in terms of religion, and as someone who did not exactly know what he believed, Levin found that aspect of all these different changes taking place in his life to be a little uncomfortable, because he didn't understand what was going on. This was something that I could relate to a lot, because I have also felt that way. I did not for a long time understand how I can come to terms with religion, because in my head it seemed to just be this idea that requires you to have blind faith, which is something that I have never been able to get on board with. Ultimately, the way Levin reconciles with all these different ideas is very interesting to me. His understanding of the world essentially changes a lot just because of how much he contemplates all of these different ideas, because he goes to a part of his land in the countryside and just lies down on the grass under a tree and just has honestly an epiphany, because the way it was written, how well it was written and described, made the whole realization of things very beautiful even to read about. Another quite relevant character is Anna's husband, Karenin. I believe what happened with Karenin during the book is sort of a curious case, because he seems to be a troubled man who has not fully met himself. When Anna first tells him that she does not love him, she honestly hates the sight of him and is in an affair with someone else, he is upset and cannot handle seeing her in tears. What I understood from reading the book and what I could see about his character was that he is not strong enough to hold someone with all their emotions. He has not met himself that deeply. How will he create a safe space for someone else to be understood by him and to confide in him? I think for this reason, Anna was never able to fall in love with him, and to me, it honestly makes a lot of sense. When Anna did tell him, he was upset and he was more concerned with keeping appearances in society, which made Anna feel even worse and honestly just proves her point. In the middle of the storyline, he does become an extremely forgiving person, because there is a part in the story where Anna falls sick and she ultimately believes she is about to die just before giving birth to Vronsky's child. And amidst all of this, she asks for forgiveness from Karenin, and he very graciously does grant her forgiveness. When I try to think of reasons why he might have done this, what comes to my mind is that he always liked to portray himself to society as someone who is of extremely high social standing in terms of his career, as well as someone who is religious and devotes himself to great things like God or his career and his official work. Which is why when Anna pleaded with him and said that he must forgive her in the name of God and that she believes he is a kind, forgiving angel, that is when he is swayed to assume the role that she is giving him. I think this also shows how even unknowingly manipulative Anna can be if she wants to. At the end of this ordeal, Anna doesn't end up dying and she safely gives birth to her and Vronsky's child. The three of them leave and just go to live abroad, and Anna leaves her husband and her son Seryozha. When this happens, Karenin is extremely sad and alone, and this is when Lady Ivanova comes into his life. She is this person who feels for him and who loves him. They never enter into a relationship, but they do have a very friendly bond that develops between them. He ultimately lets her take all the shots, because towards the end, Anna comes back and she asks for a divorce and she asks to be given her son back. Karenin just lets Lady Ivanova take all the decisions regarding this, and this lady obviously is on the side of Karenin, so to speak, and wants to hurt Anna, which is why she declines everything. What this showed me was that Karenin is the type of man who is so detached from his own emotions and feelings, and like I said, hasn't met himself in depth, which is why, when he does get the chance to, he just lays it all out on the lap of this other woman who is very ready to assume responsibility and take over things for him. Obviously, this is bad for Anna because Lady Ivanova does what she can to hurt Anna and does not let her get the divorce or her son. Lastly, I believe Seryozha should be spoken about. I feel like his character is not explored a lot, but it is one that is interesting just because of how much he has gone through, and universally how much kids go through when there are these type of familial conflicts that take place during their upbringing. Seryozha ends up becoming the type of child who is still caught up in the confusion and trauma of his mom just getting up and leaving one day, and then him being told that his mother has died, and then him seeing his mother, and then her leaving, and then him never seeing her ever again after that. He misses her and he wants her to come back and he wants to live with her, but he cannot speak about that to his father or anyone, and he avoids speaking about it. When people do ask him if he remembers his mother or if he misses her, he is extremely defensive about it and avoids any talk of the matter. I also wanted to talk about Dolly because I think she went through so much throughout the book. She, to me, represents this woman who honestly should have more self-respect for herself. She is in a marriage with this man who is extremely charming, but he does not know what it means to be a husband and to truly care and take charge of his family and provide for them. Dolly's troubles with her husband Steva progressively get worse throughout the book, and it is just this constant downward line that we see progressing, and it's never addressed. The book has no mention of whether her situation gets better, but it just slowly gets worse as the storyline progresses. I would say at around the 3/4 mark in the book, she is found wondering why her life is the way it is, why she's either always nursing a child or she is pregnant with a child, while also struggling to make ends meet and bringing up her kids in a manner that is below par in her eyes. She, for a bit, wonders what it would be like to live the way Anna lives. Towards the end of the book, goes to visit Anna, and she, in her head, creates an image of Anna living happily and being in this state of bliss, having chosen to be with a man who she loves and having no worries in terms of finances and having everything provided to her, which ultimately makes her feel very distraught about her current position. And when she does meet Anna, speaks to her for a while, it slowly dawns upon her that Anna is in fact extremely unhappy, and she has become this sort of person who cannot come face to face with what is troubling her, and she has become vain, a sad woman in general. Due to this interaction, Dolly even feels a sense of discomfort when she is meeting Anna and Vronsky, and she ultimately decides to leave their estate earlier than she planned to. On her way back, she returns home with this renewed sense of gratefulness at the simple life that she has, and she goes back sitting in her carriage feeling excitement and looking forward to taking care of her kids and seeing their faces again. She understands that the simplicity and joy of worrying about household matters, worrying about the children's education or taking care of a baby is what does satisfy her, and by comparing her position to Anna's miserable position, she feels better about her own life. I thought this was very interesting as well because it's a great study again in how the grass is always greener on the other side. Before you really, step onto the other person's land and see the quality of their grass firsthand. Those are all the ideas I had about the different characters. This book has definitely left me inspired to read more Tolstoy, and I look forward to that. Thank you for watching.